Everybody just jumped back. They couldn't believe it.
Oh, I don't believe it. What is it?
When Little House on the Prairie graced our screens, the chemistry between Michael Landon and Karen Grassle felt nothing short of magical. As Charles and Caroline Ingalls, they lit up the screen, made us laugh, and gave us a wholesome escape into frontier life. But behind those heartwarming scenes was a darkness no one could have imagined. For decades, Karen Grassle kept her silence, until now. In a stunning revelation, the actress who played Ma is finally telling her side of the story. And what she endured behind the camera will leave you speechless. From shocking mistreatment to unbearable tension on set, Grassle is pulling back the curtain on the true nature of her working relationship with Landon. And it's nothing like the on-screen fairy tale. So what really happened on the set of Little House? What did Michael Landon do that pushed Karen to the edge? Stay with us as we uncover the jaw-dropping truth behind one of America's most beloved TV shows. This is the side of Little House they never wanted you to see, making it big in Hollywood. For nearly a decade, Karen Grassle was the face of motherhood on American television, a gentle, resilient pioneer woman who held the Ingalls family together on Little House on the Prairie. But long before she became a household name as Caroline Ingalls, Grassle's story began in Northern California. Born in 1942, Grassle moved with her family to Ventura at the age of 5. Even as a child, the spotlight called to her. She studied at a local dance academy and quickly found her passion in school plays. After graduating from Ventura High School in 1959, her academic journey took her through some of the most prestigious institutions in the country. She first attended H. Sophie Newcomb Memorial College, a coordinate college of Tulane University, from 1959 to 1960 before transferring to the University of California, Berkeley. There, she earned dual BA degrees in English and Dramatic Art in 1965. But Grassle didn't stop there. Her talents earned her a Fulbright Fellowship to the renowned London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. It was a life-changing chapter. After honing her skills in London, she returned to the U.S., ready to conquer the stage. Karen's early acting career was deeply rooted in the theater. She spent summers at the Stanford Contemporary Workshop and the Colorado Shakespeare Festival, diving into classical roles and playing leads that solidified her as a serious talent. Her first professional gig came at the Front Street Theater in Memphis, Tennessee. From there, she made her way to New York City, where she immersed herself in the world of resident and stock theaters across the country. She didn't just stick to the stage either. Grassle appeared on PBS in original productions and landed roles in 3 network soap operas. In 1968, she made her Broadway debut in The Gingham Dog, a short-lived but pivotal experience. She went on to serve as a stand-in for heavyweights like Gloria Swanson and Rosemary Murphy in Butterflies Are Free on Broadway, and shared the stage with Maureen O'Sullivan and Brandon DeWilde at Denver's Ilitch Theater in 1972, a production marred by tragedy when DeWilde was killed shortly after the final show. One of Grassle's most memorable stage appearances was in Shakespeare in the Parks production of Cymbeline, where she performed alongside Christopher Walken, Sam Waterston, and William Devane. Her versatility was undeniable, but her breakthrough came in the most unexpected way. When she auditioned for the role of Caroline Ingalls, she was relatively unknown to TV audiences. But that quickly changed. Karen landed the part and stepped into a role that would define her career. Little House on the Prairie debuted in 1974 and ran for 9 unforgettable seasons. Her portrayal of Ma made her beloved by millions. While the Prairie was the heart of her television legacy, Grassle didn't stop there. Right after filming the Little House pilot, she guest-starred on Gunsmoke in an episode titled The Wiving, playing one of the saloon girls caught in a kidnapping plot. She followed that with appearances in films like Harry's War, where she played Kathy opposite Edward Herrmann, and Wyatt Earp alongside Kevin Costner. Grassle also starred in and co-wrote the NBC TV film Battered, a harrowing drama that spoke to real-life issues affecting women. She became a powerful advocate off-screen as well, lobbying for federal funding for shelters supporting battered women and actively campaigning for the Equal Rights Amendment. She used her fame to shine a light on women's rights and never backed down from the fight. Her television credits stretched far beyond the Prairie. She appeared in made-for-TV movies like Cocaine, One Man's Seduction, Crisis in Mid-Air, and Between the Darkness and the Dawn. She also made guest appearances on shows like Hotel, Love Boat, and Murder, she wrote. She even popped up on classic talk shows such as Dinah, The Merv Griffin Show, and The Mike Douglas Show, bringing her warmth and charm to daytime audiences. When the Prairie days ended, Karen Grassle turned to theater once again. She co-founded the Resource Theater Company in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and later joined the Actors Company at the prestigious Actors Theater of Louisville in Kentucky. In 2006, she settled in the San Francisco Bay Area, where she starred in productions at San Francisco Playhouse, the Ride Down Mount Morgan Cabaret, Theater Works, and the Aurora Theater. She toured nationally in Driving Miss Daisy, playing the title role in productions from Manitoba to Virginia. Her performance in Cabaret earned her the Outstanding Achievement Award in 2008. She even became the face of Premier Bathrooms, promoting accessibility products for the elderly, proving that even in commercials, she brought grace and relatability. In 2021, Karen made a touching return to film in Not to Forget, a powerful drama focused on raising awareness for Alzheimer's disease. She starred alongside Hollywood legends Cloris Leachman, Louis Gossett Jr., Tatum O'Neal, Olympia Dukakis, and George Chakiris. Through it all, Karen Grassle has remained a force, a classically trained actress, a television icon, and a fierce advocate for women. Her journey from the stages of London to the prairies of America is not just a story of success, it's a story of strength, survival, and timeless talent. How did Karen Grassle land the role that put her on the map? When Karen Grassle landed the chance to audition for the role of Caroline Ingalls, affectionately known as Ma, she was ecstatic. She couldn't believe she might soon be sharing the screen with none other than Michael Landon, the heartthrob best known for his role as the charming Joe Cartwright on the iconic series Bonanza. For Grassle, it felt like a dream opportunity, but that dream would soon morph into a behind-the-scenes nightmare that left her emotionally scarred and disillusioned. Following NBC's commitment to the Little House on the Prairie series, Michael Landon, who also served as executive producer, writer, and director, took complete control of the casting process. In the search for his perfect Ma, 47 actresses auditioned for the role of Caroline Ingalls. One of the top contenders was Hersha Parody, who would later join the show in another role. But Landon ultimately chose Grassle, claiming she looked like a pioneer woman. At the time, Karen Grassle had almost no experience in film or television. She came from a rich background in theater with university-level training and a degree in dramatic arts, but very few screen credits. That didn't seem to matter to Landon, who was intentionally casting actors with strong theatrical foundations and minimal Hollywood baggage, including Catherine McGregor and Richard Bull. His most challenging casting decision, however, was finding the right children. Landon didn't want professional daughters with stage mothers. He wanted authenticity. He handpicked Melissa Sue Anderson as Mary and Melissa Gilbert as Laura, calling them Missy and Half Pint on set. And due to child labor laws, the role of little Carrie was played by identical twins, Lindsay and Sydney Greenbush. The cast looked perfect, but behind those Prairie smiles, not everything was as wholesome as it seemed. The behind-the-scenes tension between Michael Landon and Karen Grassle. While Michael Landon and Karen Grassle portrayed the picture-perfect couple on Little House on the Prairie, their off-screen relationship told a very different story. Beneath the warm frontier charm, there were tensions that simmered, fueled by pay disputes, power imbalances, and behavior that Grassle would later describe as demeaning. In the early days of the show, Grassle was thrilled to work alongside Landon. He was already a household name thanks to his long-running role as the lovable little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza. But what began as excitement quickly spiraled into something horrifying. As Little House gained popularity, Grassle felt her contributions weren't being fairly recognized. Ahead of the second season, she requested a raise, confident she had earned it. But she later revealed that Landon blocked the request, arguing that her character wasn't all that popular, and suggesting that her salary should reflect that, comparing her worth to that of the younger cast members. After this dispute, the atmosphere shifted. According to Grassle, Landon began leaving her out of major storylines, treating her with indifference and making her feel invisible. On set, she felt bullied. her presence diminished by demeaning comments and cold behavior. The dream role of Ma had become emotionally draining, casting a long shadow over what should have been a career-defining chapter. But Grassle's experience wasn't the only hardship behind the scenes. The period-accurate costumes, while visually authentic, made filming a brutal ordeal. Female cast members were swaddled in layers: tights, petticoats, boots, and long-sleeve dresses with eye hooks up the back, all while shooting in California's relentless sun. The series was filmed in Simi Valley, where temperatures frequently exceeded 80 degrees and often crossed the 100-degree mark in summer. Alison Arngrim, who played the deliciously wicked Nellie Oleson, recalled that on her very first day on set, the temperature soared above 100 degrees, and that didn't even account for the blazing lights used during filming. Without breakfast, she began to feel faint almost immediately. She remembered feeling woozy while setting up a scene but kept quiet, terrified someone might think she wasn't strong enough for the job. As the day wore on, she became so weak that she sounded, in her words, like someone speaking from a hospital bed. Her vision blurred, and then everything went black. A medic revived her on set, and despite the ordeal, she finished the day's shoot. She would go on to become one of the most iconic TV villains of the era. But the real villain, she wrote, was the heat and the heavy wardrobe. Michael Landon, meanwhile, wasn't just acting. He was also writing, producing, and directing much of Little House. He brought over ideas and even entire scripts from his time on Bonanza. Some Little House episodes bore uncanny similarities to older Bonanza storylines, echoing not only plot and dialogue, but even camera angles. One of the most striking examples came from a 1970 Bonanza episode titled A Matter of Circumstance. In it, Little Joe is kicked by a horse and left alone at home, attempts to amputate his own hand to prevent infection, passing out before he can finish. 6 years later, Little House aired A Matter of Faith, where Caroline injures her leg while home alone and nearly amputates it herself before fainting. Both episodes were written by B.W. Sandifer and directed by William Claxton, and the similarities didn't end there. The Bonanza episode, A Dream to Dream, served as a blueprint for the Little House story, Someone Please Love Me. While he was only 7, inspired the emotional Little House installment, He Was Only 12. While these creative overlaps may have saved time in the writer's room, they also highlighted Landon's habit of recycling familiar content. Even the cast's hair was a source of agony. In the beginning, Nellie Oleson's dramatic ringlets were Alison Arngrim's own hair. She slept in curlers every night and arrived on set as early as 4:30 a.m. to endure the curling irons required to perfect her look. Eventually, the costume department crafted a custom wig for her, but the solution came with its own kind of pain. To ensure the wig stayed in place during long shoot days and the occasional on-set brawl, it was anchored with a metal comb and dozens of bobby pins. Arngrim wrote that there wasn't a single moment when it felt comfortable. On particularly rough days, the pins dug into her scalp, sometimes leaving tiny cuts. When she rubbed her head, she would find flecks of blood on her fingers. The on-set hairdresser would then rush in and disinfect her wounds using Seabreeze astringent before filming continued. The Ingalls family may have struggled on screen, dealing with crop failures, poverty, and harsh winters, but according to Ed Friendly, one of the show's original producers, they were living a little too well behind the scenes. Friendly, who co-created the show with Landon, later told People magazine that the production had strayed too far from Laura Ingalls Wilder's original books. In his words, the Ingalls family had been softened and polished for network appeal. One change that bothered him was that the kids wore shoes. Landon allegedly didn't want them to be the poorest kids in town, which Friendly thought defeated the purpose of portraying frontier hardship. Another network executive apparently objected to having the family live in a sod house, calling it too depressing, which led to a sudden upgrade to a frame house. Frustrated, Friendly claimed to have nicknamed the series How Affluent Is My Prairie, and quipped that the Ingalls had everything but a Cadillac. Ultimately, Friendly walked away from the show before it aired, yet it went on to become a cultural phenomenon without him. Even with all its behind-the-scenes tension, extreme heat, and recycled plots, Little House on the Prairie held a special magic for audiences. But for the cast, particularly Karen Grassle, the experience wasn't nearly as heartwarming as it seemed on screen. From invisible injuries and heat-induced blackouts to professional slights and emotional wounds, life behind the camera was a far cry from the simple joys of Walnut Grove. What fans saw was a wholesome family drama about love, resilience, and frontier values. What they didn't see was the cost, physical, emotional, and professional, that some actors quietly paid to bring that dream to life. But while Karen Grassle had struggles on set, she also had struggles in her personal life. Karen Grassle's drinking problem. By 2021, Karen Grassle had spent decades as a beloved figure in American television history. But when she released her memoir Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, Reflections on Life, Loss, and Love from Little House's Ma, readers quickly realized there was far more behind the calm, nurturing face of Caroline Ingalls than anyone had imagined. The book was personal, painfully so. It wasn't just a behind-the-scenes look at Little House on the Prairie, it was a lifetime of struggle, heartbreak, and triumph. Grassle had been keeping journals since the age of 13, trying to make sense of growing up with an alcoholic father. Those early entries laid the foundation for a memoir that would bear it all, including her own battle with addiction. She wrote about the complicated relationship she had with Michael Landon, her co-star and boss. But perhaps even more striking was her honesty about the demons she faced privately, long after the cameras stopped rolling. In 1977, everything changed. It started with what seemed like an innocent moment. She had organized a cast luncheon and allowed herself a glass of wine, the only time she ever drank at work. But back on set, she found herself obsessing. She went outside, splashed water on her face, rinsed with mouthwash, and smoked a cigarette. Nothing helped. Her mind wouldn't let go of the wine. She realized something was wrong. About a week later, she traveled to a feminist conference where she was scheduled to give a speech. Nervous, she drank a bit too much beforehand. The speech dragged. She felt humiliated. Afterward, she visited an old friend, someone who had just attended Alcoholics Anonymous. The friend called it out plainly. Karen had a problem, and for the first time, she couldn't deny it. Back home, she tried to quit. She failed. One more drunken night, one more ruined conversation, one more round of tears. And then the decision came. Final, fierce. She would never drink again. She got help. She stayed sober. Just a few months later, her father, her first model of addiction, died from alcoholism. She didn't need a reminder. She already knew this disease kills. And so, she chose to live, sober, clear-eyed, and determined to reclaim her voice. But even as she found strength in recovery, another silent battle was waiting for her. It wasn't in a bottle this time. It was on set. Karen Grassle finally breaks silence on what Michael Landon did to her. When Karen Grassle first stepped onto the set of the Little House on the Prairie pilot, she was entering unfamiliar territory. With a rich background in theater, television was still a new world. Michael Landon welcomed her warmly. In her words, he was extremely kind and sensitive in those early days. He directed with care, offered her support, and gave her space to find her footing. At first, it felt like the beginning of something magical, but the magic didn't last. Nearly 40 years after the beloved series ended, Grassle finally opened up about what really happened behind the scenes, revealing a truth that surprised many fans. While the world saw a loving frontier couple in Charles and Caroline Ingalls off-screen, Grassle and Landon were far from harmonious. The truth, she revealed, was that Landon could be incredibly cruel. In her memoir Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, Grassle described the behind-the-scenes environment as far more toxic than fans could have ever guessed. She recounted the disgusting jokes Landon told in front of the cast and crew. He made fun of her appearance, mocked her facial expressions, and brushed off her request for fair pay by suggesting she didn't deserve more than the child actors. The show, after all, had only just begun to air in 1974, and despite its growing popularity, Grassle was paid between $2,000 and $4,000 per week, even at the height of her fame. When she asked for a raise going into the second season, Landon shut it down. He reportedly told her that she wasn't as popular as she thought she was, and that her paycheck should reflect that. Grassle admitted feeling insulted. As the co-star of a hit series, she hadn't been looking to make unreasonable demands, she simply wanted fair compensation. After that moment, things shifted. She noticed her scenes being cut and her presence in the storyline shrinking. Landon began treating her coldly, and when he wasn't ignoring her, he was mocking her behind her back. Crew members were often the audience for his jabs about her body and expressions. Grassle remembered feeling paralyzed, unable to confront him directly. It felt like she was frozen. But as a woman working in the 1970s television industry, she had grown used to enduring these kinds of put-downs. It never occurred to her to push back sharply, so she kept her head down, stayed professional, and played the part, the good girl, hoping things would improve. But the cruelty didn't stop there. Landon's language on set could be downright vulgar. Grassle recalled him using slurs like C*****T and making vile jokes about women's bodies. The worst of it, she explained, happened during their intimate one-on-one scenes, the tender bedroom conversations that fans adored. She loved filming those moments where the couple would quietly flirt while discussing life's latest hardships. But over time, those scenes became unbearable. Landon began cracking crude jokes while they were lying in the bed, surrounded by a full male crew and under hot lights. Grassle described the experience vividly. She said she felt trapped, physically stuck in that tiny bed in a small, overlit room with men standing all around her and nowhere to escape. It was humiliating. Still, despite the strain, the two were able to reconcile in the years following the end of the show. Grassle reflected on that, expressing how grateful she felt that their relationship ended on a more positive note before Landon's death in 1991. Over the years, many of Landon's co-stars and collaborators have offered glowing tributes to him, often portraying him as warm, funny, and deeply caring. But Grassle's revelations added a new layer to the narrative, and she wasn't the only one to speak critically of him. Melissa Sue Anderson, who played Mary Ingalls, also offered her own perspective in her memoir, The Way I See It, a look back at my life on Little House. She acknowledged that Landon was a great father based on what she observed, but added that in the workplace, he was controlling. He had a mean streak and would single out individuals to tease them publicly and relentlessly. She also revealed a striking detail about the series finale, when Landon blew up the entire town of Walnut Grove. It wasn't just a dramatic ending. According to Anderson, Landon's real motivation was revenge. He didn't want anyone else to use the sets after the show ended. As beloved as Little House on the Prairie remains, the stories from behind the scenes paint a far more complicated picture. One filled with creative genius, high pressure, quiet pain, and the cost of keeping the peace in a time when speaking up didn't always feel like an option. Michael Landon's pattern of being difficult to work with. Although Michael Landon is remembered as a gifted actor, writer, director, and producer, and remains deeply loved by countless fans and even many cast members, his legacy is far more complicated than his on-screen persona suggests. Behind the camera, Landon earned a reputation for being difficult to work with, emotionally volatile, and particularly demeaning toward women. When Karen Grassle finally broke her silence, she was not alone. Her account, shocking to many, echoed what others had quietly endured for years. She wasn't the first to speak out, and she likely won't be the last. Following Grassle's all-telling book, another voice soon added weight to Grassle's revelations. Allison Arngrim, who played the infamously wicked Nellie Olson, spoke candidly about her experience with Landon, painting a portrait that both confirmed Grassle's claims and added new dimension. Speaking at an event honoring Bob Hope and U.S. veterans, Arngrim described Landon as someone who was more mad, bad, and dangerous to know than the wholesome farmer he portrayed. In her words, he drank, smoked, told terrible jokes, and embraced a workplace culture that mirrored the male-dominated, whiskey-fueled vibe of Mad Men. She likened the set atmosphere to an old boys' club, where locker room humor wasn't just tolerated, it thrived. Arngrim recalled that Landon drove a Ferrari, chain-smoked, and rarely slept. He gave off the impression of being fueled entirely by manic creative energy. She noted that his level of drive, operating at full throttle 24/7, could easily wear others down. The set, she explained, had its tensions, but disagreements were often left at the door of the makeup room, which she called a demilitarized zone, where cast members reset before stepping on set. Yet despite the chaos, Arngrim admitted she enjoyed Landon's wild energy. As a teenager, she found his outrageous behavior entertaining. She had no personal conflicts with him and described him as extraordinarily eccentric, a man who was both marvelous and crazy. In her view, he was not everyone's cup of tea, but he was never boring. Even his contradictions fascinated her. A man who played a poor prairie farmer on screen but drove a Ferrari in real life, married 3 times, and lived far from modestly. While Arngrim's account didn't mirror Grassle's trauma, it validated the broader picture. The man the public adored as Pa Ingalls was, in reality, layered, flawed, and often reckless in how he used his power. His dominance behind the scenes was so complete, few dared to challenge him. Even those who were mistreated, like Grassle, stayed quiet for decades, conditioned by the industry's power dynamics and an era that normalized silence from women. Grassle's revelations, however, have brought new attention to the uncomfortable truths that were long buried under nostalgia. Her memoir doesn't aim to destroy Landon's legacy, but to complicate it, to show the cost of brilliance when unchecked by empathy or humility. It peels back the veneer of perfection and asks fans to consider the people behind the characters. Arngrim, who later wrote her own best-selling memoir, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, How I Survived Nellie Oleson and Learned to Love Being Hated, emphasized that despite the dysfunction, the show had a way of pulling everyone together. The moment the cameras rolled, they became a family again, even if, behind the scenes, that family was fractured. Today, Little House on the Prairie continues to be remembered as a wholesome, heartfelt piece of Americana. But for some of its cast, the truth is more complicated. Behind the warmth and the prairie sunsets were power struggles, painful silences, and moments that still sting decades later. How Michael Landon's creativity led to problems. Before Little House on the Prairie turned Michael Landon into America's most beloved frontier father, he had already carved out a name for himself as the charismatic Little Joe on Bonanza. Both shows became iconic, synonymous with family values, grit, and old-fashioned Americana. But behind the scenes, things were rarely as wholesome. If Little House revealed Landon as a perfectionist powerhouse with a controlling streak, Bonanza was where that fire first ignited. It was on the Ponderosa Ranch that Landon honed his craft and clashed with colleagues. Long before he was writing scripts and directing episodes on his own terms, he was ruffling feathers, but also evolving from a hot-headed heartthrob into a man determined to control the narrative, both on screen and off. There's seemingly no shortage of on-set feuds in Hollywood. And while it's no surprise that not everyone is going to get along, some behind-the-scenes tensions spiral into full-blown rivalries that can sour an entire production. For the cast, it creates a toxic working environment. For the audience, it becomes impossible to watch the show the same way again. The drama off-screen can become bigger than anything happening in the script, and in some cases, it even overshadows the legacy of the show itself. One of the longest-running Western dramas in television history, Bonanza aired from 1959 to 1973, delivering 14 seasons of classic frontier storytelling. It was a landmark in American television, a show that allowed audiences to grow alongside its characters and cast. Over the years, the professionals behind Bonanza became masters of their craft, refining their performances, deepening their storytelling, and establishing something that felt real. That kind of longevity doesn't just happen. It demands commitment, consistency, and a thick skin. At the center of it all was Michael Landon, cast as Little Joe Cartwright. Young, charming, and hot-headed, Little Joe was a fan favorite from the beginning, and the parallels between the character and the man playing him weren't lost on those behind the scenes. Landon brought with him a raw energy, one that could light up a scene or ignite tensions in a heartbeat. In Conversations with Michael Landon, Tom Ito painted Little Joe as rebellious, describing him as hot-tempered and high-spirited, traits that mirrored Landon's own personality during his early years on the show. Behind the camera, Landon had what Ito referred to as a defiantly energetic personality. That intensity, while captivating on screen, sometimes created friction on set. One source of that tension was director William Claxton. According to the book, Claxton once appeared in a televised interview and didn't mince words. He described Landon's attitude in the early years as pugnacious, even referring to the actor as a brat. Those initial seasons of Bonanza weren't always smooth sailing, and Claxton recalled a young actor whose passion frequently clashed with authority. But like any long-running series, time had its impact, not just on the characters but on the people behind them. Claxton also acknowledged that Landon changed. As he matured, his restless energy found new purpose. What began as sheer force of will transformed into artistic obsession. Landon became fascinated with the technical and creative aspects of television. Writing, directing, producing, he wanted to do it all, and eventually he did. It was this creative drive that shaped the second act of Landon's career. Those who watched him on Bonanza saw more than just an actor evolve. They saw a man begin to take control of his destiny. The shift didn't just alter his standing on the show, it shifted how he related to others. Where once there had been friction, there was now focus. Instead of fighting the system, he was building it. By the time Little House on the Prairie arrived, Landon wasn't just a lead actor, he was a creator. His time on Bonanza had taught him how to lead a set, how to craft a story, and how to shape the vision of a show. But it had also created a complex man. While some praised his genius and work ethic, others found his leadership style controlling, even domineering. That complexity followed him into his next projects. On Little House, co-stars like Karen Grassle and Allison Arngrim would later reveal just how turbulent things could get. For some, Landon was a brilliant mentor. For others, he was impossible to work with. But none could deny his talent or his evolution. In a way, Landon's story mirrored the arc of a television character. Introduced as a firecracker of youthful charisma, rough around the edges, he grew into a man obsessed with storytelling and perfection. He could be warm and magnetic or icy and exacting. He was a contradiction, a man who could make audiences cry on screen while creating tension off-screen. What remains undeniable is that Bonanza shaped Michael Landon, just as Landon helped shape Bonanza. The actor grew up on that set, matured within its scripts, and used its lessons to catapult himself into an entirely new creative phase. The show gave him his start, but it also tested every part of who he was. And just like the show that made him famous, Landon's legacy is layered, complex, and deeply human. What do you think about Michael Landon? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.